So in this camera comparison, we have a 200 megapixel sensor in the Galaxy S23 Ultra and a full 1-inch 50 megapixel sensor in the Vivo X90 Pro Plus. And so if you follow my channel, you'll know that I'll probably lean towards the 1-inch sensor on the Vivo, just because when it comes to cameras, sensor size matters. Larger sensors let in more light, allowing you to capture photos and videos with less noise and more detail, but also with a more shallow depth of field or bokeh or natural background blur that a lot of people seem to like. That being said, I also say that software image processing plays a big role in the quality of smartphone cameras. So like I always do, I'm going to show you a bunch of photos and videos in both good and low light conditions to help you decide which of these two camera systems might be best for your smartphone camera needs. So let's take a look at all the photos and videos and let me know what you think. So we're out here testing the video on the rear cameras of the S23 Ultra and Vivo X90 Pro Plus. And as you can see, they both are actively recording from the rear facing cameras. And this is the ultra wide angle camera to start out on each at 4K 30 frames per second. HDR video is off on both. I'll turn it on in a bit so you can see the difference between it off and on. Again, it's off right now. And the Vivo does have that speech enhancement feature, so I can actually turn it on right now. You can hear what that sounds like. Usually it sounds a little bit garbled, a little bit digital, but if you have a lot of background noise, it'll definitely work to cancel that out. Turn it off. So now it's off and we're on the normal microphones now. And let's go ahead and punch into the main cameras on the S23 Ultra. And it's more of a slider here, right there. You saw it kind of click in on the Vivo. Let's do it one more time. So this is the ultra wide still, and you saw it clear up with the main camera. So these are the main cameras on each. Still HDR video off, so you can see what it looks like here in this particular setting in the park. So I'm gonna come back and turn on HDR so you can see the difference. All right, we're back still with the main cameras. This time HDR is on each, and this is still at 4K 30 frames per second. So I'm just gonna pan around here to give you a feel for how this looks here on the main camera in HDR. On the S23 Ultra, you can use the ultra wide to shoot HDR video. You cannot do that on the Vivo. So we'll go back to the main camera on the S23 Ultra. Also, you have a limited zoom range on the Vivo with HDR turned on. So with HDR turned on, you only have a 2x digital zoom, where you can go use your telephoto 3x, your 10 times periscope, and still go to a max 20 times digital zoom there on the S23 Ultra. So I'm gonna come back, we'll turn off HDR and we'll test out the full zoom capabilities here. All right, so we're back on the main lens. HDR is turned off so we can test out the full zoom capabilities. So again, on the S23 Ultra 3x telephoto, you saw it snap in there. And then on the Vivo, we can go to the 2x. You saw it snap, 2x here, you'll see it snap in. So you see it looking like a little bit unclear, unfocused. Boom, it snaps in on the 2x telephoto on the Vivo, and then we can go into the 3.5 times telephoto on the Vivo as well. So let's kind of get this to go in here. So a few more taps and you'll see it snap in, and right about now. So you see it clear up, 3.5 telephoto there. And then we can go to a 10 times periscope zoom on the S23 Ultra, which is nice and steady. We can go to a 10 times equivalent zoom here on the Vivo. A few more taps to get there. So 10x digital on the Vivo, 10x optical on the S23 Ultra, and we'll go to a max 20 times on the S23 Ultra, and we maxed out here at 10 times on the Vivo. So let's go ahead and back both of these out to 1 time so we can test out the autofocus here on the post with the S23 Ultra first. So let's see, focused up and away, and again in the shade, a little bit more difficult here, but you can see it focus up and create a really shallow depth of field with that sensor. And then let's go ahead with the Vivo, same thing, a little bit faster to focus maybe, but also a really nice shallow depth of field or natural bokeh background blur there. And so we'll test out stabilization as we walk down the stairs so you can see what that looks like side by side in 4K and how the stabilization is holding up compared to one another. And we'll go ahead and jog to try to stress them out a little bit. So there you go, outdoor video test on the rear cameras, Vivo X90 Pro Plus, S23 Ultra. So we're back with the same scene, and they both can shoot at 8K 30 frames per second, which is what you're seeing here, and they're limited to the main cameras. And on the Vivo, there is no stabilization here, so you might be seeing less of a crop, but it's gonna look a lot more shaky. But I just wanted to show you what 8K looks like here, as far as the video quality, color reproduction, etc. in the same scene, so you can compare it to that 4K footage that you just saw. So as you pan around, you can see how they both handle exposure changes and light changes. And we'll do a little quick zoom test here. So we go max times, let's see, I think 10 times on the Vivo, and then we can go max 6 times here digitally on the S23 Ultra, but of course the Ultra is going to look much more stable with that stabilization on. And so let's back both these out, and I don't know if you really want to see autofocus. I don't think it's going to change, but we can do that really quickly. We'll just do a couple. S23 Ultra right there, Vivo right here, all the same speeds as we saw in 4K. And then let's do stabilization, which is going to be a lot more shaky on the Vivo because of the lack of stabilization, but you can at least see what the stabilization looks like here on the S23 Ultra at 8K. And of course, if I jog, the Vivo is going to be really shaky here. But just want to show you 8K versus 4K, or 8K on both these phones here. So I just wanted to show you some 4K 60 frames per second footage on the rear cameras here. Again, outdoors, pretty even light, but if I pan around, you can see what it does with the different lighting conditions with it directly on me right now. And then if I pan this way, you can see what it looks like with the sun directly behind me. And also with the panning and some of this walking, you can test stabilization as well as some of the motion. Even though it's not exported at 60 frames per second, you should at least see a difference in quality, if any, or color reproduction. So let me know what you think about the 60 frames per second footage here on the rear cameras. However, we're back with the rear cameras, this time with the portrait video on the S23 Ultra, cinematic video on the Vivo. And so you should be seeing an artificial background blur on this. And in this mode, you can shoot 4K on the S23 Ultra, but you're limited to 1080p Full HD on the Vivo. But you can adjust the amount of blur on both of these. And so if you want more or less blur, that's up to you. You can fully adjust that in the settings. I've got it about 75% on each. And just want to show you some movement and some stabilization to see how that effect holds up under those conditions. So let me know what you think about this mode on both the rear facing cameras. Alright, so we're going to test the advanced stabilization options with super steady on the S23 Ultra and horizontal level on the Vivo X90 Pro Plus. So I'm going to jog, so pay attention to the horizon and see which one can keep it a little bit more level here. So there's a quick test of the advanced stabilization options on the rear cameras here on the S23 Ultra and Vivo X90 Pro Plus. So here's some front-facing video on both phones. The S23 Ultra can shoot up to 4K 60 frames per second. This is 4K 30 for now. And the Vivo can shoot up to 1080p 60 frames per second, so no 4K on the Vivo. The Vivo does have speech enhancement, so if I turn that on right now, you can hear what that sounds like. Again, probably sounds a little bit digital, more garbled, but if there's a lot of background noise, like there's some street noise coming off to my right now, this can come in handy. It will block it out if you really need it. So I'll turn it off, so you can now hear that what it sounds like with the regular microphones on both these phones right now. So I'll just pan around so you can see what it looks like with the changing light. So sun directly shining on my face, and panning this way with the sun directly behind me. That's probably gonna blow out the picture a little bit here. And we'll just try to test stabilization as well. So let me know what you think about these front cameras and how the stabilization looks. I'll come back with some HDR footage on the Samsung because they can do that, so just want to show that to you. All right, we're back with the front-facing cameras. Still same resolutions, but I have HDR video turned on the S23 Ultra. You can't do HDR on the front-facing camera on the Vivo, but just want to show you the capability here on the S23 Ultra. Again, I'll just pan around so you can see what the HDR video looks like here with different light, because that really affects the dynamic range in this setting. And again, I'll just pan around and we'll look at the stabilization as well. So let me know what you think about the HDR footage and how that compared to the non-HDR footage on the S23 Ultra. Everyone, and lastly, on the front-facing cameras, we have portrait video on Samsung, cinematic video on the Vivo. So you should be seeing this artificial background blur right now. And again, they're adjustable on both, so if you want more or less blur, you can do that. And then here you can see how it performs into the different changing lights. So with the sun directly behind me, what that does to the picture quality, and with it directly in front of me, as well as with some movement as I walk. So we'll see how that effect holds up here. But let me know how you think about this kind of artificial background blur mode on both these front-facing cameras. So here's some video from the rear cameras on the S23 Ultra and Vivo X90 Pro Plus. This is the ultra wide angle camera on each to start at 4K 30 frames per second. I'm just going to pan around here with the ultra wide angle camera so you can see how it performs side by side in this particularly fairly well lit scene here. So you can see how they're performing with some pretty optimal light here, other than that really bright street light that you're seeing in the right corner. Let's go ahead and move into the main lens on the S23 Ultra, and then let's go ahead and push into the main camera on the Vivo X90 Pro Plus. And you see there, they both brighten up. The main camera has wider aperture, it's going to let in more light. It's going to look a lot brighter. You can already see the trees against that skyline where it was kind of blended in to to the skyline with the ultra wide angle camera, and of course it's going to flare out that really bright light more than the ultra wide angle camera will because of that. So let's go ahead and pan around this way, and we'll just walk through testing stabilization here, as well as to move over to a much darker area, more challenging lighting situation versus that really well lit area you just saw. And as always, these cameras are going to brighten things up, lift up the shadows more than what you're seeing with your own eyes, and that's what it's doing right now. And because of that, you're starting to see some noise and artifacting, and with that really bright light, it's causing some problems. And so we'll pause here and we'll pan up into the sky, and you can see because of that light, all the light pollution. And when we pan around this way, it's actually darker down this alleyway, much darker than what these cameras are showing. It looks really bright in the viewfinder, and it's a lot darker. So you can always control that by dialing back your exposure, and I'll come back and I'll show you what it actually looks like because of that. All right, we're back with the main camera, but I dialed back the exposure, so it should be looking a lot darker and much more what I'm seeing with my own eyes, much more realistic here, although that bright light's still bright but not causing as much problems. And we'll pan up into the sky, and you can see it looks a lot darker, a lot less noise. So if you want night to look like night, just dial back your exposure and you're good to go. So here's some low light footage from the front facing cameras on the S23 Ultra and X90 Pro Plus. This is being shot at their max resolution, which is 4K on the Samsung, 1080p on the Vivo, and they're being shot at 30 frames per second, even though the Samsung can record up to 60 frames per second. But like I always say, 60 frames per second is a bit dark in low light, so I really just don't use it. And I'm starting here in my usual testing spot with some pretty good lighting around me, so you can see what these front facing cameras can do in some pretty optimal light. So let's just go ahead and start walking so we can test the stabilization. You can look at that, what that looks like side by side. We'll also move over to a more darker area, more challenging lighting situation, so you can see how these cameras do against a bit darker light compared to that really bright scene behind me. I'll be walking by a water fountain right now to my right, so we'll test out the microphones and how they do against the sound of my voice here. And the Vivo does have that speech enhancement feature, so I can turn that on right now. And so now you should be blocking out the background noise, but at the expense of maybe my voice sounding more digital or garbled. But at least you can block out a lot of that background noise with that speech enhancement on. I'll turn it off. And so now we're back to the regular microphones on the Vivo. And so I'll pan around this way so you can see how they handle the really bright street lights behind me. They're all doing pretty well, maybe a little bit more flare on the S23, but not really too bad considering how bright those lights are. Actually doing pretty well, I think. And let's go back to this darker area so you can see what these front-facing cameras look like in a much darker area side by side. And of course, like all cameras, they're going to try to brighten things up, so you're going to see more noise and artifacting because of that, and the color temperature gets a little bit off, but that's pretty typical of most cameras, especially front-facing cameras. So that's going to wrap up my camera comparison between the S23 Ultra and X90 Pro Plus. So let me know how you thought they performed, which one you personally preferred, and why. Drop a comment in the comment section and we'll continue our conversation down there. And as always, thanks for watching.